The wind came off the Wyoming flats hard enough to knock the breath sideways, and Martha Sullivan stood in it without flinching, watching the rider grow from a smudge on the horizon into a man she recognized. Ezra Coleman didn't come to town for pleasantries. He came for supplies, for the mail, for the things a ranch couldn't grow or make itself. He never came for her, but here he was, reining his horse in front of the boarding house where she swept the porch 3 mornings a week for $2, and a room she couldn't quite afford, hat pulled low, jaw set like a man walking into a fight he'd already lost once. "Miss Sullivan." He said it like he'd practiced it on the ride over. Martha set the broom against the rail. She was tall, taller than most men in Larkspur, tall enough that her mother used to say she'd never find a husband who didn't feel small standing next to her. She'd made peace with that a long time ago, mostly. "Mr. Coleman." She wiped her palms on her apron, though they weren't dirty. It gave her hands something to do. Something wrong out at the place? He looked past her, at the boarding house window where old Mrs. Fenwick was pretending not to watch. Then he looked at his boots. "Lily's not eating right," he said. "Hasn't been sleeping neither. Since," he stopped himself, started over. "Winter's coming hard this year. I got cattle to see to, fences down on the north pasture, and a 4-year-old who cries if I'm out of her sight past supper." Martha waited. She'd learned that about men like Ezra, the ones who circled a thing 3 times before they said it plain. "I need help," he said finally, like the words cost him something. "Around the house, with her." If you've ever watched someone work up the nerve to ask for the one thing pride told them they didn't need, you know how heavy a silence like that can sit. "There's women in town better suited," Martha said. "Mrs. Pratt does washing for half the county. Mrs. Pratt's got 6 of her own and a husband besides." Ezra's eyes came up to meet hers, and something in them was steadier than his voice had been. "I asked around. Folks say you're good with children, say you're strong, say you don't scare easy, say you're too big to marry," she thought, though she didn't say it. The town had a way of turning a compliment into a consolation prize, and Martha had stopped waiting for anyone to notice the difference. "You're offering wages?" "Room and board. Wages when the calves sell in spring." He hesitated. "It ain't much. I know it ain't much." She thought of her own room upstairs, the way the wind found every crack in the boarding house wall, the $2 that never quite covered what she owed. She thought of a 4-year-old girl she'd seen exactly twice. Once at church, clutching a rag doll and not her father's hand, and once at the mercantile, standing so still and quiet, it had unsettled Martha more than any tantrum could have. "I'll need to think on it," she said, because saying yes too fast felt like admitting how little she had to lose. Ezra nodded, like he'd expected that. He turned his horse, then stopped. "She hasn't spoken since her mother passed," he said, not looking back at her. 4 months now. Not one word. He rode off before Martha could ask anything more, leaving her standing on the porch with the broom forgotten, and the wind pulling at her skirt like it wanted an answer too. The ranch sat 2 miles north of town, and Martha walked the distance 3 days later with a bundle of her belongings on her back and no clear memory of deciding to come. She told herself it was the wages. She told herself it was better than the boarding house. She did not let herself think too hard about the rest of it. The house was sturdy but bare. A man's house, built for function, not comfort. No curtains, no flowers pressed in books. Just a table, a stove, a rifle over the door, and silence thick enough to walk through. Lily sat in the corner of the front room when Martha stepped inside, a rag doll in her lap, her eyes tracking the newcomer with the wary stillness of a rabbit deciding whether to bolt. "Well," Martha said, setting her bundle down slow, careful not to make any sudden moves. "You must be Lily." "I'm Martha." The girl didn't answer. Didn't need to. Ezra had already told her she wouldn't. Martha crouched down anyway, bringing herself closer to the girl's height, which took some doing, given how she towered over most grown men. "I like your doll." What's her name? Silence. But Lily's fingers tightened on the doll's arm, and her eyes didn't leave Martha's face. From the doorway, Ezra watched without a word. Martha caught him at it and straightened up, feeling suddenly conscious of her height in his low-beamed house, of her rough hands, of every way she didn't match whatever picture a man like him might have carried of a wife, of a mother for his girl. "She'll warm up," he said, though it sounded like he was convincing himself as much as her. "Took her mother a while too, when we first—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "There's a room off the kitchen. It ain't much, but it's yours." That night, Martha lay awake, listening to the house settle around her. A stranger's house, full of a dead woman's absence, and a child's silence, and a man who slept with his door open, she noticed, like he was still listening for something he'd never hear again. She heard him get up twice, heard him stand outside Lily's door, not going in, just standing, the floorboards creaking under a weight that had nothing to do with his boots. The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters, and somewhere in the dark, Martha found herself wondering what exactly had happened to the first Mrs. Coleman, because the way the town told it, and the way Ezra's shoulders sat when her name came up close to the surface, were not the same story at all. She didn't sleep much after that. In the morning, she found Lily sitting at the kitchen table, doll propped in the chair beside her, 2 bowls set out like she was expecting company. One of them was already filled. Martha stood in the doorway, a long moment before she understood. The girl had set a place for her. She hadn't spoken a word, but she'd made room. The bowl sat between them, oatmeal gone cold at the edges, and Martha didn't touch it right away. She understood, somehow, that eating it mattered more than she could explain. "Thank you," she said, sitting down across from Lily. "Did you make this yourself?" No answer. But Lily's eyes flicked to the spoon, then back up, waiting. Martha ate. It wasn't good. Too much salt, barely any sugar. But she finished every bite, while the girl watched with an intensity that made Martha's chest ache in a way she didn't have a name for. By the second week, a rhythm had settled over the house. Martha rose before dawn to start the stove, packed Ezra a lunch he ate standing at the door like he begrudged the time it took to sit, and spent her days chasing after a girl who spoke only in gestures, a tug on the sleeve, a pointed finger, a small hand slipping into hers when the wind howled too loud against the windows. It wasn't easy. There were mornings Lily wouldn't leave her room. Afternoons she cried without a sound, just tears running down a face that never twisted or reddened, like she'd learned crying quiet was safer than crying loud. "Does she do this often?" Martha asked one evening, after coaxing the girl to sleep with a hummed tune she half remembered from her own childhood. Ezra sat at the table, mending a bridle strap, not looking up. Started after the funeral. Before that, she talked plenty. Talked my ear off, most days. "What happened to her, Mr. Coleman?" His hands stilled on the leather. For a moment, Martha thought he might actually tell her. His mouth opened, some words forming behind his teeth. But then he shook his head and picked the mending back up. Fever took her. Same as it does. His voice had gone flat, the way a door sounds when it shuts firm. Ain't nothing more to say about it. But there was. Martha could feel it sitting in the room with them, the way you feel a storm before the sky admits to it. If you've ever lived in a house where grief hides behind ordinary chores, you know how loud the unspoken things can get. The town noticed, of course. Towns like Larkspur always noticed. Martha rode in for supplies near the end of the month, and the whispers followed her down the mercantile aisle, like flies she couldn't wave off. Heard she's living out at the Coleman place now. Housekeeper, they're calling it. Big as she is, guess she can handle the work at least. Martha kept her chin level and her basket full, refusing to let her shoulders curl the way they wanted to. She'd heard worse. She'd heard it her whole life. Comments about her height, her hands, the way she filled a doorway other women slipped through unnoticed. She'd built a wall around it years ago, brick by brick, out of necessity. But it was Mrs. Pratt, cornering her by the flour sacks, who landed the blow that actually stuck. "You know why Sarah Coleman really passed, don't you?" the woman said, voice pitched low and delighted, the way gossip always sounds when someone's enjoying the telling more than the truth deserves. "Fever, they say. But my Thomas swears he saw Ezra riding hard for the doctor 2 days before anyone even knew she was ailing, like he already knew something was coming. That's not my business, Mrs. Pratt. Might ought to make it your business, dear, seeing as you're living under his roof now." The woman's eyes swept over Martha, not unkindly, but with the particular pity reserved for someone about to make a mistake. A man doesn't hide grief that deep, unless there's something under it he don't want found. Martha paid for her flour and left without another word, but the comment rode home with her, heavier than the sack on her shoulder. That night, she found Ezra out by the barn, staring at nothing in particular, a lantern burning low beside him. "Lily's asleep," she said, coming to stand near, not too near, beside him. He nodded, didn't look over. "Folks in town talk a lot," Martha said carefully, "about your wife, about how she passed." Ezra's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. "Folks in town got nothing better to do than chew on things that ain't theirs to chew." "I'm not asking to chew on it, Mr. Coleman. I'm asking because I'm raising your daughter now, and I'd like to know what she's carrying, before it comes out sideways some morning I'm not ready for." He was quiet a long moment, long enough that Martha thought he'd shut the door on it again, same as always. "Sarah wasn't happy here," he said finally, voice low, rough at the edges. "Not for a long while before she passed. Wanted things I couldn't give her. A house in town, a husband who wasn't married to cattle and dirt first. We fought." He swallowed. "We fought bad. The week before she took ill, said things." His hands curled at his sides. "Lily heard some of it. More than I knew, I think, till she stopped talking altogether." Martha's chest went tight. "You think she blames herself for not stopping it?" "I think she blames me," Ezra said, and for the first time since Martha had met him, his voice cracked clean through the middle. "And I think she ain't wrong too." The wind moved through the yard, carrying the smell of hay and cold earth, and neither of them said anything else for a long while, just stood there. Two people who'd both learned the hard way that silence could hold more truth than talking ever did. 3 days later, Lily wandered off. Martha noticed at the worst possible moment, turned from hanging wash to find the yard empty, the girl's small footprints already filling with blown snow near the tree line. She didn't call for Ezra. There wasn't time. She ran, skirts hiked to her knees, the cold biting straight through her boots, following the tracks down toward the frozen creek bed, where Lily liked to sit sometimes, and watch the water that wasn't water anymore, just ice holding its breath. She found the girl at the edge of the bank, standing too close to a patch where the ice had gone thin and dark, watching it like she was waiting for something to happen. "Lily," Martha kept her voice soft, even, though her heart was slamming hard enough to hurt. "Sweetheart, come away from there now." The girl didn't move, didn't even seem to hear her. Martha took one careful step closer, then another, close enough now to see the ice groaning faint beneath the girl's boots, a hairline crack spreading slow toward her feet. "Lily, look at me." And for the first time in 4 months, the girl turned and opened her mouth. "Mama used to sit here," Lily said. The words came out small and cracked, like something long unused finally forced through a rusted hinge, but they came, and Martha felt her whole chest crack open right along with them. "I know, sweetheart." She didn't move fast, didn't reach for the girl yet. "But the ice isn't safe. Can you take a step back toward me? Nice and slow." Lily looked down at her own boots, at the dark crack spreading beneath them, and something in her face shifted, fear finally catching up to the moment. 4 months late. She took a step back, The ice groaned but held. Martha closed the last distance in 2 strides and swept the girl up into her arms, off the bank entirely, holding her so tight she could feel the small heartbeat hammering against her own. "I've got you," Martha said, into her hair, into the cold. "I've got you now." Lily didn't cry. She just held on. Small fists twisted into the fabric of Martha's coat, and said it again, quieter this time. "Mama used to sit here, before she got sick. She said it was the only quiet place left. Was she unhappy, your mama?" A pause. A nod against Martha's shoulder. Papa yelled. She yelled back. I hid under the table. Lily's voice wavered but kept going. 4 months of silence spilling out now like a dam finally giving way. Then she got sick, and I thought if I didn't say anything, maybe it wasn't real. Maybe if I stayed quiet, she'd come back. Martha carried her the whole way back to the house, the girl's face pressed into her neck, and by the time Ezra came pounding up from the north pasture, someone from town must have ridden out to fetch him, or he'd simply known, the way parents sometimes know. Lily was talking, really talking, in the halting, overflowing way of a child who'd been saving up words for months and didn't know where to put them all. Ezra dropped from his horse before it had fully stopped, and Lily reached for him, without hesitation, without the wariness she'd carried around him for months. "Papa," she said, and his knees nearly buckled at the sound of it. He held her like a man who'd been drowning and just found the surface. That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, worn thin from talking, from crying, from being a 4-year-old who'd finally set down a weight too big for her to carry alone, Ezra found Martha on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. "She talked," he said, still sounding like he didn't quite believe it. "All through supper. Didn't stop." "She's been carrying something," Martha said. "Thought if she stayed quiet, she could undo what she heard, what she thinks she caused." Ezra sat down heavy on the porch step beside her, closer than he usually allowed himself. "She heard us fighting. That week. She told me." He was quiet, a long moment, staring out at the dark line of the tree row. "I never told anyone that. Not the whole of it. Sarah wanted to leave, wanted town life, wanted a husband who wasn't up before the sun every day of his life. I told her if she wanted that, she could go find it. Told her cruel, the way a man does when he's scared instead of angry." His voice thinned. "She got sick 3 days after. I never got to take it back." "That's not a thing you did to her, Ezra." Martha said his first name without meaning to, and didn't take it back. "That's a thing that happened near her. There's a difference, even if grief doesn't want you to see it." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he hadn't let himself, since she'd first stepped onto his porch, with a bundle on her back, and no clear reason to stay. "You're the first person who said that to me, without needing something first," he said. "Everyone in town's got a theory, got an opinion on what I did, or didn't do. I'm not from town, not really, not the way they'd have you believe." Martha pulled the shawl tighter, looking out at the same dark tree line. "I've spent my whole life being talked about, instead of talked to. Too tall, too plain, too much of everything nobody wanted. So I know the sound of people deciding who you are, before they've bothered to ask." "I don't think any of that," Ezra said, quiet but certain. "Haven't since about the 2nd week you were here, watching you with her." He shook his head slow. "Sarah never sat with Lily like you do. Never had the patience for the quiet parts. You've got a way of waiting that lets a body finally speak." Martha felt heat rise in her face, despite the cold, and was grateful for the dark that hid it. "She set a place for me," Martha said. "That first morning, before she'd said a single word to me, she set a place at the table, like she already knew I'd stay. Smarter than her old man then," Ezra said, and there was something almost like a smile in it. "Took me considerably longer to know the same thing." Winter deepened over the following weeks, and the house that had once felt like a hollow space around a grief nobody spoke of began, slowly, to fill with sound. Lily's voice, asking 100 questions a day, as though making up for lost time. The scrape of a second chair pulled closer to the stove in the evenings. Ezra, lingering at breakfast instead of eating standing at the door. He started fixing the things around the house that had sat broken since his wife passed. A loose shutter, a door that hung crooked, small repairs that had nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with a man deciding the place was worth mending again. It was Lily who said it first, on an evening in late January, tugging Martha's sleeve while Ezra sat close by, mending harness leather by the fire. "Are you going to be my mama now?" The room went still. Martha felt Ezra's eyes come up from his work, felt the question hang there, bigger than either of them had let themselves name out loud. "That's not up to me alone, sweetheart," Martha said carefully. Lily turned her whole small body toward her father. "Papa, can she?" Ezra set the leather down. For a long moment he just looked at Martha across the firelit room, at the woman the town had called too big for marrying, too plain for wanting, and who had, without asking for a single thing in return, put his broken house back together with her own 2 hands. "I've been meaning to ask something similar myself," he said, low, rough at the edges, the way his voice went when it mattered most. "Just been working up the nerve, same as I did the day I first came asking for help." Martha's breath caught somewhere in her chest. "I'm not a man with much polish to offer," he went on, standing now, crossing the small distance between them. "Just a ranch, a hard-headed girl who finally found her voice again, and a fool who took too long, finding his own good sense. But I'd be obliged, Martha Sullivan, if you'd consider making this arrangement permanent, not room and board. A home, a family, if you'll have us." Martha looked at him, then down at Lily, whose face had gone bright with a hope too big for her small body to contain, and felt something settle inside her that she hadn't known was still unsettled. Some old belief, worn into her by years of town gossip and empty rooms, finally coming loose and falling away. "I've spent a long time thinking I was too much for anybody," she said. "Feels strange, being wanted exactly as I am. Feels right to me," Ezra said. "Felt right for a while now, if I'm honest." She reached for his hand, and he took it like a man who'd been waiting a long while to be given permission. Lily let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw herself against both of them at once, small arms not quite reaching all the way around, and the 3 of them stood there by the fire, while the wind worked itself into a fresh fury outside, locked out for once, from the one house in Larkspur that had finally stopped being cold. Spring came early that year. Folks in town still talked, the way towns always do, but the talk had shifted, from pity to something closer to envy. Watching Martha Sullivan walk the mercantile aisle, with a rancher's arm looped easy through hers, and a little girl skipping ahead of them both, chattering without pause about calves and creek water, and whether her new mama would teach her to bake bread just right. Ezra Coleman had asked for shelter that day on the boarding house porch. He'd gotten considerably more than he'd bargained for, a wife who filled his quiet house with sound, a daughter who'd found her voice again, and a home that finally felt, after a long, hard winter, entirely whole.